When the Detroit Pistons landed the 5th overall pick in the draft lottery, again, after having the worst record in the NBA, again, many viewed it as a disaster. Already in a weaker draft, they fell 4 spots in the lottery. However, I think they actually made an incredible pick at 5th overall, taking G League Ignite wing Ron Holland. Holland was a divisive prospect in this class. At the beginning of the season, he was a projected top 3 pick, and many thought he could be the number 1 pick. However, despite putting up good numbers with Ignite, that Ignite team was so bad they ended up folding the program after the season, and due to some of the flaws on tape, people thought he could fall out of the lottery. However, I was still really high on Holland and thought he was a top 2 prospect in that class, and I think the Pistons getting him at pick 5 is incredible value. Is the fit perfect? No, not by any means. However, for a team as bad as Detroit, they need to take talent and can't worry as much about fit. And I do think the selection of Ron Holland makes one thing very clear about the Pistons moving forward. But quickly before we go any further, if you're new and like basketball, I'd really appreciate if you would like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, notify whenever I release a video. I make videos about basketball all the time, and liking and subscribing are the 2 best ways can help me on the YouTube algorithm, help support the channel, and help me reach my goal of 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. Let's try and get 100 likes on this video so YouTube will recommend it to others. Anyways, let's talk about Ron Holland. Ron Holland is a 6'7", 200-pound wing with a 6'11" wingspan, giving him the ideal frame on the wing, and I think can add more functional strength to his frame and get to around 215 to 220 pounds, which could make him an ideal wing-forward hybrid. On top of having the physical tools, he's also a freak athlete. In my opinion, he was the best pure athlete in the draft. He's explosive with unreal vertical pop and range, he's got a very quick first step, he has great speed in the open floor, he has really good body control, he's pretty physical already and can definitely get stronger. He's one of the better pure athletes I've ever evaluated. He's not as quick or fast as a Jaden Ivey per se, but he is similar to Ivey in terms of being that middle ground between the more lean and quick athletes and the developed and powerful athletes. He doesn't quite lean towards one or the other. He kind of is in the middle and has a chance to expand on both aspects of that athleticism. What he brings to the table right now is an ability to attack the basket, run the floor in transition, and draw fouls. All 3 things he's really good at right now, and I do expect a lot of his early work to come at the rim. And the other area I think he's going to show a lot is his defensive versatility. He was one of the best defensive prospects in this class. He makes plays off the ball, he covers a lot of ground, he can clean up some of the technical aspects of defense in terms of his discipline, but his motor is the best I've ever seen in a prospect. He doesn't take plays off. He plays with high energy every second he's on the court. He makes those hustle plays that don't always show up in the box score, and you can't teach what he has in terms of wiring. Now, he's not a perfect prospect. He's not a good shooter right now. The mechanics could use some work, but he's not afraid to shoot, and given the upside he has, what he has shown me as a shooter is enough to be encouraged and suggest that he can get better as one. The decision making also needs work, but he can improve on that with time and reps. And overall, I just think a lot of his flaws are more fixable than others believe them to be. I do like his handle. It can get better. It can be a bit loose at times, but I think it's good enough to create for himself. And I think it has shown signs of improvement to believe that it will get better in the league if he continues to work, and I have no doubt that he will continue to work. But what impressed me most was Holland and his progression. He was someone who made significant strides on the ball from high school to his time with Ignite. And to see that kind of development at such a young age is encouraging for a player who's taking on a whole new role for the first time in his career, let alone a new role that required as much responsibility as the one Holland had, while also making a massive leap in terms of competition level, going from high school to playing against G League guys, which really speaks to what I believe his motor, his mindset, and his wiring are as a player. I think people overthought Holland as a prospect. Again, it was a bad team, there's no doubt about it. There's a reason that they folded the program. But it was a bunch of kids playing against grown men, so the results weren't as shocking as I thought they would be, especially considering the lack of veterans on this edition of Ignite compared to the Scoot team, the Jalen team, the Jaden Hardy teams. And I do think people were too low on Holland because what I saw was an 18-year-old that's one of the youngest players in the draft that averaged 27, 3, 2, and 1 on league average true shooting percentage with a 28.1 usage rate on a team that wasn't that good, didn't really fit well, but he was still productive at such a young age against, again, grown men with pro experience. On top of the fact he has athleticism and wiring in terms of motor that just can't be taught. I'm not saying he's the next LeBron or anything like that, but his production combined with his tools were worth taking very high in this draft. In fact, he was my number 2 prospect on my big board behind Alex Sarr. And along with Sarr, he was one of two 2-1 prospects in this class for me. To give you an idea of how high I am on Holland, I had a higher prospect rate on him than I had on Cam Whitmore and Jonathan Kuminga. Kuminga was my 9th ranked prospect in a pretty good class, and Whitmore was my number 5 prospect in one of the best draft classes I've evaluated. I would have considered Holland at 1, I had a significantly higher grade on him than I had on Visasay, so I think getting him at 5 is really good value. I'm actually very excited about the potential development for Holland in Detroit. The Pistons just hired Fred Vinson as an assistant coach, and Vinson is one of the best shot development, in fact, scratch that, he is the best shot development coach in the NBA. For context, he's the one who fixed Lonzo's jumper and made him a high 30s to low 40s 3-point shooter on good volume. He's also the one who helped Herb Jones develop into a respectable shooter. And while Holland's shot definitely needs work, he's not a lost cause mechanically. It's not like the shot is completely broken. And I think that with Vincent knowing how to fix shots, combined with the motor and work ethic of Ron Holland, I think he can develop into a good shooter. It's no guarantee, only time will tell, but I'm confident in his situation and context to believe that the chances of him developing into a much better shooter in the NBA are pretty high. I think he's further along as a shooter pretty easily compared to Asar Thompson. Now, I don't know if Holland will start right away. He's a better scorer than Asar right now. But I think even though I'm very high on Holland's defense, Asar is a better defensive player right now. However, I also see a world where Holland does start right away because I think Asar can play the forward due to the fact that he's pretty physical and is the best non-big rebounder not named Josh Hart in the NBA. And I also think Holland can play some forward as well. I think you can expect around 11 to 13 points per game, 5 to 6 rebounds per game, 2 to 3 assists per game, 1 to 2 steals per game, maybe a block per game, on around 44 to 45, 33, 75 splits from Holland as a rookie. The Pistons don't really have an excuse to not play him at least 25 minutes per game. He will have his ups and downs. In fact, I think his early years in the NBA will look like what I think Jonathan Kuminga's early years would have looked like if he got drafted by a bad team instead of the Warriors. The efficiency may be up and down. It won't always look pretty on the ball, but you see the athleticism, motor, and upside. And I also think Holland is a better player than Kuminga was entering the NBA. I think he's a more fluid athlete than Kuminga. I think his handle and on-ball ability is better than Kuminga's was entering the NBA. And I also think he's a bit more aggressive as a driver compared to Kuminga at the same age. And Kuminga himself has become a very good player. And I'm not saying that Holland will be as good as Kuminga is or as good as Kuminga can be. Again, that's something only time will tell. But I see similar upside between those two. And definitely think that's a player Pistons fans should be looking at when you look at comparing where Holland is in his development and where Kuminga wasn't his development at the same age. Holland has a decent range of outcomes in my opinion, but I think all of them are pretty high. At worst, I think he's a defensive-oriented rotation piece that brings value off the bench. His motor, activity level, and athleticism are enough for me to believe he can at least be a 15 to maybe 20 minute per game defensive guy, kind of like a Jared Vanderbilt. Great defensive impact, but limited offensively, but it's still efficient because of the play finishing and transition threat that they are. I think the middle ground outcome is like a 4th or 5th starter on a really good team. Puts up solid offensive numbers while being a great defender, maybe even all defense caliber guy. Somewhat like a Herb Jones, but maybe not quite Herb Jones defensively, because I think Herb Jones is one of the 3 to 5 best defensive players in the world. But similar offensive output while still being a positive impact defender, and that's a really good player. The best case scenario is him really figuring out the jumper, and I think if he really figures out the jumper, he could be an all-star that maybe sneaks onto an all-NBA team in the right team context. A 20 to 23 point per game, 7 rebound per game, 3 to 4 assists per game player on good efficiency and great defense. I'm not saying he's going to be Jaylen Brown. Jaylen was a more physically developed prospect, and I don't know if Holland will ever reach the levels of strength and physicality that Jaylen has. Jaylen is one of the most physical and strong players in the league and probably the strongest wing in the NBA. But I do think Holland and Jaylen were similar levels of prospects in terms of Holland's Ignite tape compared to Jaylen's Cal tape. Now, Jaylen is an outlier development case. I thought he would be good, but I didn't see top 2 option on an all-time great team and finals MVP level good. But while I can't guarantee that Holland will be an outlier development case, his on-ball strides across the year going from high school playing against kids to playing against grown men in Ignite, on top of the fact that he just has a great motor, I think that you can't rule out the possibility of it, even if you can't guarantee it. Now, what does this mean for the Pistons? Well, I think that the thing that was made very clear was this is Cade's team. He's the priority. When they drafted Holland, I think they made it an emphasis to say that, okay, this guy can fit next to Cade. It's not about how he fits next to Ivy, not how he fits next to Asar. They fired Monty Williams and waived Killian Hayes, but if those two were still around, it wouldn't be about Killian and his fit next to Ron. Cade is the priority, and that should always be the case. He somehow had a positive box score plus minus this season, despite how awful this Pistons team was. I think him and Duren were the only 2 positive impact players on that entire roster. He put up pretty good numbers despite having to carry that Pistons offense as well. And I think this move shows that the Pistons are probably going to move one of Ivy or Asar. Now, I did have a higher prospect grade on Holland than I did on Asar, but that speaks more to how high I am on Holland than how low I was on Asar. Asar was a borderline top 5 guy for me in a pretty good draft class, and Holland was the number 2 guy for me that I would consider at pick 1 in a not so strong class, but both of them would have been around the same range for me if they were in the same draft class. It's much more likely that Ivy is moved because the Pistons just don't seem to like him, even though he's a very promising young player. Monty Williams will pay for his crimes in that regard. But regardless of all of that, I really like what Detroit did. In my opinion, they not only took the best player available, they also took one of the 2 best prospects in this class at pick 5. Holland isn't a perfect prospect. I don't know if he'll ever be a future superstar, but he's also a very easy prospect for me to bet on. He has good production against older competition. He has the motor, wiring, and athleticism you just can't teach. He made strides on the ball that are very encouraging. And while it's no guarantee, he continues to improve at the rate he does because development is not a linear thing. If he were to continue to improve at the rate he has shown over the past year for the next 4 to 5 years in the NBA, he will be as good as someone like Jaylen Brown. What Holland will be in the NBA though is something only time will tell. He could be as good as Jaylen Brown. He could just be a solid player. He could be a bench player. He might even exceed all expectations. Anything is possible, and that's what makes the draft so fun. But I believe in the wiring and tools that he has at such a young age, and I think that he will prove not only to be worth that 5th overall pick, but also someone that I think will prove he should have gone a lot higher. But that's the end of this video. If you made it to this point, thank you so much. Again, haven't already, like, subscribe, hit notification bell, notify whenever I release a video. I make videos about basketball all the time, and liking and subscribing are the 2 best ways. Can help me out on YouTube algorithm, help support the channel, and I'll be reaching my goal of 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. Let's try and get 100 likes on this video so YouTube will recommend others. Let me know what you think about the Pistons picking Ron Holland. Was it the right pick? Was it the wrong pick? Who do you think should have been the pick? Do you think Holland went too high? Do you think he went too low? I'd love all that in the comment section down below. But with that being said, have a nice day, and I'll see you guys in the next one.